So, as you know, Sean Combs have been found. Sean Combs have been found not guilty on 3 counts. All right, he has been found not guilty on 3 counts. The family is happy. They're ecstatic, to my understanding, from hearing what they're saying in the media and other content creators on in the field, on the ground. They're saying that Diddy called his family in together for a moment of prayer, and then after the prayer was over, everybody cheered and they were super happy, and a lot of people was very excited or felt very impressed that he was able to lead his family. They all believed in him. They all believe in him. And of course, he's the patriarch of the family. So of course, So with that being said, let me start off by reading what came out. Right, this is from CNN. So let me share the screen, and then I can read from there. All right. So as you can see here, I hope you can see the screen. I hope it's big enough. But it says, Sean Diddy Combs denied bail. So after the verdict was handed down and he asked for bail, they told him no. So the feds got a defeat and they can't handle it. So they denied bail. So they want to hold him in prison on those other 2 charges for now. But there is his team. They're apparently super lawyers here, and they got these charges dropped. The feds didn't continue on pursuing these three charges. They had nothing. It wasn't substantiated. It wasn't strong enough, so they had to let it go, right? Because like I said before, many people have said that how can it be that Cassie and other people that were involved in these freak-offs just got off, strike a deal, and they were let off, and they turned state witness. All right, so let me continue on with this article from CNN. Sean Diddy Combs denied bail as he awaits sentencing. So obviously they're going to sentence him on those other counts. Hopefully he's able to figure something out. But of course they're going to go back in and try to get him off. All right. So before I read the side about the bail, I'm going to read about what they said about the charges. So Combs' attorney maintains he did not sexually assault anyone. Tenny Gergos, one of Sean Diddy Combs' attorney, maintained that the music mogul has not sexually assaulted anybody after the verdict in his federal criminal trial. She goes on to say, quote, I also have been saying this since the beginning of this case. Sean Combs has not sexually assaulted anybody. I've been saying this for months. We've said it with each lawsuit that came out. That was proven true. So it was proven true today. So let me continue. She goes on to say, the media got it wrong about Sean Combs every single day for nearly 2 years, unquote, she said today outside of the courthouse. She continued to say, quote, he has not sexually assaulted anybody, certainly hasn't sexual trafficked anybody, and the jury found that today, unquote. So she said, goes on to say, Combs was found guilty on 2 counts, transportation to engage in prostitution, but was acquitted on the most serious, that means the most egregious charges, racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. Those 3, if he had gotten those 3, we're looking at about anywhere from 50 years in prison. But his lawyers, they were able to get him. One of the lawyers was actually the lawyer for Young Thug, right? So I don't know if you remember the Young Thug trial, but one of the lawyers was the lawyers for Young Thug. So let's go on to see what else has been said. Defense attorney touts the jury for getting the situation right enough. Mark Agnifilio, Sean Diddy Combs' attorney, touted the jury's work to reach today's verdict. Quote, one thing stands between all of us and a prison, and that is a jury of 12 citizens. And we had a wonderful jury. They listened to every word and they got the situation right. Certainly right enough. And Agnifilio said, let's continue. The jury acquitted Combs on sex trafficking charge and racketeering conspiracy. He added, calling Combs innocent. Now, let's look at some other quotes. Today is a win. Today is a victory for all victories for Sean Combs, unquote, Agnifilio said. Defense attorney calls Combs' verdict a great victory. Defense attorney Mark Agnifilio calls today's verdict in the court of Sean Diddy Combs a great victory outside of the courthouse in New York City. Quote, it's a great victory for Sean Combs. It's a great victory for the jury system, unquote, Agnifilio said. Right? So, as we can see here, and I could go on, the list keeps going down of so many different things that have been saying in favor of the jury and how they found Sean not guilty on 3 counts, which were the three most serious counts, right? So let's see what this one say. Let me read here. All right, let me read this one. This one is interesting. Combs tells his family, "I love you all. Be strong," unquote. Following his bail hearing, Sean Diddy Combs faced his family and told them, we are gonna make it through this, unquote. Quote, I'll see you when I get out, he added, unquote. So he's confident that he's going to get out. Hey, maybe he's shelling out some, maybe he's shelling something out, but he's confident. Listen, in the case back in the 90s or early 2000s, right, of OJ, if it don't fit, you must acquit. And so these charges did not fit. Yeah, they were kind of, wow. The things that we've heard during the course of the trial about Diddy and the things that he likes to do, being in the corner and enjoying himself by himself with Palmelina and the baby oil, Cassie and the baby oil rubbing all over the Punisher and everybody else. However, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. And that's what the jury found today. It did not fit, so they acquitted on 3. And the 2 that fit, they say, hey, we have to hold you on these. So let's continue. All right. So where did I leave off? Combs blew kisses to 2 rows off the courtroom. Combs blew kisses to the 2 rows in the courtroom filled with his family and friends. Quote, I love you all, unquote, he said. Quote, be strong, unquote. Just before being led out of the courtroom and back into detention, he said, I love you, Mom. Wow. Quote, I love you, Mom, unquote. Hey, they have a undying love for each other. Mom and son love each other from day one. Hey, I don't know if everybody knows. They could sue Diddy until kingdom come. They're not going to get a dime. You know why? Because everything sorry, everything, I'm tying up right now. My tongue is tying up. Everything is in his mother's name, to my understanding, right? Because when I used to pursue music, I learned that a lot of the assets that Diddy controls is in his mom's name, right? And she's 80 years old now. So uh, remember, I don't know if you guys know, when they were indicting him, he was in the process of moving all his assets into his children's name, right? Into the twins' name, to my understanding, in sons' names, all the assets. There's nothing in his name. That's smart, right? He may be difficult to deal with, and some people compare him to what's his name, from the Rockefeller. Come on, I can't think of his name right now. It'll come to me, right? That he's difficult to deal with. He's very aggressive, very emasculating to people, to men, very domineering overall to women and men, right? However, he's smart. He's a smart businessman. He may be a bully. Hey, in business, you have to be a bully at times. He may be a bully. However, he's a smart enough businessman to know that the assets that he controls cannot be in his possession, because they'll go after him. And when they go after him, what are they going to get? They consume until kingdom come. And he's still going to be living a lavish life. Why? Because the family that's around him and love him and is dear to him, and he's dear to them, are going to make sure he's fine. He has sons that he has nurtured and conditioned to be somewhat like him. So don't care what anyone says. He's a smart man, shrewd, smart man, music and movie gatekeeper, because if you didn't go to any one of Diddy's parties, you might not have a way to meet some of these celebrities to get into movies and film and video and music and so on and so forth. Because for a long time, he's a gatekeeper. So let's continue. So, quote, here's another one, quote, he'll get his life back, unquote. Sean, sorry, let me read that again. Quote, he'll get his life back, unquote. Combs' attorney tells his supporters. After the judge left the bench, defense attorney Mark Agnifilio turned to Sean Diddy Combs' supporters. He told them, United States District Court for the Southern District of New York never loses racketeering cases. Wow, that's a strong statement, and I've heard that's very true, that New York District Southern Courts have never lost a racketeering. So this is the first. He told them that Combs showed up and he wasn't afraid. Quote, he'll get his life back, Agnifilio said. Right? Quote, sorry, let me read that again. Quote, he'll get his life back, unquote, Agnifilio said. Quote, winning is winning. So you live your life and you live a good life, unquote. So it's just nothing but good, positive affirmations that are being said, right? They're very tenacious, very supporting, and understand that they have to be courageous in this pursuit. They anticipate a good outcome, and they got 60% of the situation resolved. That's a good win. All right. So let me. I'm going to bring in Pierce Morgan, right, and see what Pierce Morgan is saying. Right. But before I do that, I think I want to read this one regarding Dawn Richardson, right? So follow along. Attorney for Dawn Richards calls Combs' verdict a disappointment. Let me read that again. Attorney for Dawn Richards called Combs' verdict a disappointment. Now, let's continue. Dawn Richards' attorney reacted to Sean Diddy Combs' verdict after a jury found him guilty on 2 of the 5 charges. Quote, today's split verdict is a disappointment, but the criminal charges are different than the civil claims we filed and have been fighting against Sean Combs. We will continue to aggressively fight our case until we obtain full and complete justice for Dawn, unquote, Lisa Bloom said in a statement. Now, I don't know if you guys remember what they did to OJ. OJ won the case. The gloves didn't fit, and he got acquitted. The statement, if it don't fit, you must acquit. I don't know if you know that. If the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. But what did they do after? They kept on filing civil cases after civil cases after civil cases. Why? Because they wanted to ruin him. They wanted to leave him broke. Because how dare you get away with killing a white woman? That was what some people were saying. They were so angry because it said and a lot of people have turned against him because he used to say, I ain't black, I'm OJ, right? That's what he used to say. And then his wife cheated on him and a lot of stuff happened and he raged out. But at the end of the day, a jury of his peers, 12, found him innocent, but they needed to make sure that he suffered. So they filed exorbitant amount of civil cases against him. And they're going to do that. So when I see what Dawn Richards' attorney says, that they're going to keep fighting, right? Lisa Bloom, they are going to try to go in his pockets. But remember what I said just a few minutes earlier. Nothing is in Sean's names, to my understanding. And if nothing is in his name, there's nothing they're going to get. Right? I'm a bit excited because I'm shocked that this actually happened, because I purposefully said I was not going to give any reaction, any feedback, any commentary until the time for the jury to start deliberating and start responding and listening. And over the last few days, it's a show that they've been very, very observant, taking notes, asking questions. If they weren't unsure, they would ask. And if they weren't getting the answer, there would be some confusion, and one of the jurors were difficult. Listen, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. If they sue Sean in civil court, there's a great possibility that they will not get a dime. A dime. Even if he's in prison, they will still not get a dime.
Sean Diddy Combs has been found not guilty of racketeering and not guilty of sex trafficking his ex-partner Cassie Ventura, another woman referred to only as Jane. The jury did find him guilty on 2 counts, both of transportation to engage in prostitution, related to those same 2 women. Well, the verdicts have come as much of a bombshell as the case itself. We have an all-star panel of opinionated insiders and legal experts to explain what it all means and what happens next. In a moment, I'll talk to Young Jock and Sammy the Bull, and I'll talk to the Punisher, whose evidence appears to have been pivotal in this trial. But we begin with our legal panelists. Bruce Rivers, the criminal defence attorney who's covered the Diddy trial fastidiously on his popular YouTube channel. Suge Knight's former attorney, Matthew Fletcher, who's repeatedly questioned the strength of the prosecution's case. And Ariel Mitchell-Kidd, a lawyer who's represented other women who claim to have been Diddy's victims. Well, welcome to all of you. Matthew Fletcher, let me start with you, because you've been very clear with me in the many times you've appeared on Uncensored during this case that you believed they were not going to get convictions on the more serious charges. And what is fascinating about that, A, that you've been proven right, of course, but also that in the Southern District of New York, the success rate for federal prosecutors is 93%. You know, they hardly ever fail. So just why do you think here, I mean, it's being billed as Diddy beats the feds. Obviously, he's not completely beaten them, but he's only been found guilty of the least serious charges. Why do you think that has happened?
The government saying he's a bad person, which he is. He's a horrible, rotten woman beater. And as I told you last time, Agnifilo is going to get up there and say, convict him of every single count of domestic violence. But there aren't any counts of domestic violence. He did that. I told you before that they were going to sit there and say that these women enjoyed this. There was no coercion. There was no duress. And to show that one video of what happened years ago, that's what they built their entire case on. And it's horrible, but he wasn't charged with that. Racketeering, RICO is meant for particular vices, and those vices don't include shipping in prostitutes, and unfortunately they don't also include beating your wife or your girlfriend. That's what he was. He's a wife beater or girlfriend beater. He was never should have been charged with this, never close. All the people who were wringing their hands and saying, oh, well, they must have convicted him in four counts. It's not even true. They never believed the word Cassie said. They never believed the word Jane said. That jury wasn't even out. 1 hour of deliberations, they came and said, Judge, we need to throw juror 25 off because he's not deliberating. That told you there was already a group of people together who were willing to go in one direction or the other. That jury deliberated 3 hours, essentially, before they had conviction or had verdicts, which a fast verdict like that, in my experience, tells me that's clearly a defense verdict, clearly. They came back today and it was over. It wasn't a strong case. It was a strong case in the media and all the pundits who wanted to say he's a woman beater, which he is. That doesn't equal a RICO charge.
No, well, you've been very consistent on that. I mean, given the convictions he's now received, what is his likely sentence? I mean, each count, I think, is a maximum of...
Got to give him 2 years.
It's a maximum of 10 years on each count. So what do you think you'll get?
Yeah, but the feds are different. First of all, he's convicted of procuring a prostitute. If we're going to start throwing music moguls and billionaires in prison for procuring prostitutes, we're going to need to expand the prisons. We're going to have to get, alligator Alcatraz fired up. But, under the guidelines, he has no criminal records, basically. So he should get the minimum sentence, which is 2 years, and they...
Pay attention. Listen. As the men are speaking, pay attention to that woman's face. Pay close attention to her expressions. Just watch.
Could screw them over and run them bow-legged and do them consecutively. There's no reason for them to do that. I expect at 1 o'clock the judge is going to give them bail. I don't know why they wouldn't. I mean, there's very few people in federal prison right now for these charges, so I would be surprised if he didn't get bail, and he should get the minimum because that's what they're not going to look at. Beat up Cassie. That's not relevant.
No, it's irrelevant. But let me ask you this, on a technical point, can the time that he served in prison then be removed? Say he gets 2 years to run concurrently on both counts, so he serves 2 years. Would they remove time served, or is that irrelevant?
The judge can do whatever the judge wants to, but he gets his credit. In feds, it's day for day, so he gets $1 for every dollar he put in. So he's 7 months into this already. So if they run him concurrently, he's looking at probably a 20-month guideline, and you knock off 7, and there's very real chance that he's not ever going to see a federal prison. That's if it doesn't get. If the president doesn't do something with it, because this is the kind of thing that you can see someone granting a pardon on. I mean, it's the White Slave Trade Act. That's real difficult to sentence somebody on the White Slave Trade Act in 2025, just from a practical standpoint.
Okay.
The government failed miserably.
Yeah, well, they clearly have. Ariel Mitchell-Kidd, you represent a number of women in civil cases against Sean Combs. What is your reaction to this verdict?
Well, I think it's important that we discuss the lack of diversity that was on the prosecution team. That was probably my most concern when I faced them, when I had a hearing for a motion to quash during the grand jury testimony. I was very concerned when I was looking across from me at 6 white women and them not being able to grasp just exactly how to convey what has occurred to a jury and being able to relate these things to a jury. Of course, my clients are very shocked at all of this. I am shocked. I'm actually very shocked at how they were able to reach the transportation aspect, but not the other 2 charges, because one kind of flows with the other.
Well, they don't though, really, do they? Because the transportation is that you're transporting people illegally across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. But that doesn't mean there's any coercion. And in fact, they have rejected all the charges which would then lead on to a coercive situation. No sex trafficking.
You can't cut me off and let me not finish my statement.
Sure.
So in reference to, first of all, the bar they have to meet. It's a very, very high bar in criminal court. It is beyond a reasonable doubt. So, of course, it's clear that he did these things transporting women who said, the Jane Does who said they were also transported for this reason. However, when we talk about the coercion, I thought the elements were met. If you are asking me where I think the prosecution fell short, was I think taking 6 weeks to put on their case was a mistake. It was overkill. I think had they shortened and streamlined their case, maybe in a 3-4 week at max point, they would have been successful.
And when you say the prosecution team wasn't diverse enough, what exactly do you mean? What are you saying?
There were 6 white women, so there was not any other voice other than a white woman's voice being heard. There was not a man's voice, a man's perspective of any race, let alone any other race, especially a black voice, considering.
Oh my gosh. Are you serious? They always make it about identity politics. That has no relevance in this. A black voice. Like, what? What's a black voice? What's a white voice? I understand that they're prejudiced, but please, you can see the feminist oozing out of her. It's annoying just to hear her talk. Looking at her, she looks like a clown.
Just how, I don't even know what the word impactful is, not even a good enough word to describe Diddy's, I want to say impacts, but that, again, that's not even a good enough word. His chokehold, I'll call it, on the black community. So when I look at, like, for example, R. Kelly, who, in my opinion, didn't do half as much or a quarter as much as Diddy did, for him to be in jail for 25 years and Diddy to essentially be getting possibly 10 to 20 years, 10 years max on each count, I don't understand.
I don't understand how she can sit on this panel and just talk a bunch of gibberish. She sounds like a total blowhard, right? I don't understand. I don't understand. But let's continue.
Be Ariel.
And there was more evidence.
Could it be, Ariel, that we're just in different times? That when R. Kelly went down, we were still in the kind of full flow of the Me Too movement, the Time's Up campaign. There was a kind of, real zealous desire to put bad men away for long periods of time, Harvey Weinstein and others, and that the mood has changed somewhat now, and that people listen to the evidence, particularly with Cassie Ventura, where, you know, she settled with Diddy for, you know, a lot of money, many millions of dollars, had her rent paid, then she, in all the text messages that were leaked, carried on sending him very loving text messages, talking openly about wanting to do the freak-offs. The Punisher, who I'm going to interview again a little later in the show, you know, when I interviewed him, he was very persuasive that everything that he was involved in was not only consensual, but Cassie was the one driving it all. She was the one paying him. She was the one organizing everything. Diddy just sat in the corner watching them.
I mean, but let's be for real. Cassie didn't have her own money. So if that was the case, why did her parents need to take out a loan to pay Diddy for that $20,000?
But my question is
so
whether
it's not.
Listen,
not like
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying.
And this was her thing to
Okay,
do.
but Ariel, you're missing my point. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm saying, do you feel like there's a different mood now about these cases?
I would hate. I was about to say I was trying to get to what your question was, which is. I would hate to think that the application of the law is on the whim of the attitude of the people. So that's what you're implying, that because the wind has changed, there's an inappropriate application of law. And I would hate to think that we live in a society where that is occurring.
Okay. Bruce Rivers, I mean, you were very confident that he was going to go down to prison for the rest of his natural life. That is clearly not going to happen. So how do you feel about this verdict?
Well, I think the case was overcharged to begin with, and what the defense did in this case, they really focused on the free will of Cassie Ventura. When you have somebody that's a hanger-on, somebody that is getting something out of this, as opposed to somebody who's being forced into something, you know, that's where I think the defense really won the day. And you know, I was going basically on the sensationalistic nature of the conduct, because it really is bad. But when you really apply, I just tried one of these RICO cases here in Minneapolis on a gang case about a month and a half ago, and it's really easy to prove. But the thing about it is here, the court can use some of this acquitted conduct in sentencing, and so. It's the final chapter hasn't been written, you know. I know
you mean he may still get a substantial prison sentence? You think
he could? He could. The average person wouldn't, but the average person doesn't have all this other conduct. Did he? Not just the offense for which he's charged. You know, he's got what I think he's like 7 months in or something like that. So if you just look at the low end of the guidelines, he's almost got that served. And so a judge may say, this is not what the message I want to send to the public. You know, and the judge very well, he could sentence him consecutively. I doubt that he's going to, but
hasn't the jury look? I mean, isn't the bottom line here that the jury seems to have concluded, and we may hear from some jurors.
Yeah, I was saying that yesterday when I was having a conversation. I was saying that they are not. I don't think that they're going to make the sentencing once they decide how long it's going to be. They're not going to make it concurrent.
It says we're just pleased that he still faces substantial jail time, or that remains to be seen. By coming forward with her experience, Cassie has left an indelible mark on both the entertainment industry and the fight for justice. She displayed unquestionable strength and brought attention to the realities of powerful men in our orbit and the misconduct that's persisted for decades without repercussion. I'm not sure she has established that in terms of the eyes of the jury. You know, I share the general view that video of Diddy beating her up in the hotel corridor was disgusting. He's clearly an appalling woman beater. However, that's not what he was charged with. And in terms of the charges, it just seems to me they didn't establish that any of this was non-consensual.
There's some truth to that, but they could have decided the RICO on the fact that there wasn't an enterprise. I mean, they could have we don't know why they acquitted on the RICO. On the sex trafficking, you know, it has to be forced fraud or coercion, but they could have acquitted on something else. It's pretty, and I think one of the things, like you said, Pierce, is that they really focused on the free will, and they had plenty of evidence to back that up. all the text messages saying, I can't wait for the freak off,
Right.
I mean,
but I thought,
Hartford-
listen, as somebody, who's just looking at it with a journalist eye, I found that pretty persuasive for the defense. And again, I think it comes back. I mean, I'll bring Matthew back in here. The reason I mentioned the changing mood really about these kind of stories.
I'm gonna
is
pause.
that I think
Piers
that
Morgan here.
Now, just being in the courtroom, seeing the feeling, seeing the family, seeing everything that everybody's going through, my initial just instinct would say, yo, this man woke up today facing life in prison. He almost lost his whole entire life. The jury was hung yesterday. They come in today for 45 minutes and they find him unanimously not guilty of 3 major charges, sex trafficking for Jane and Cassie. And you telling me you can't give that man bail? Like, this is crazy. And I understand that he may have done some things to put himself in this situation, but I feel for the family, man. I feel for his mom. I feel for the kids. I feel for the family. This is a tough thing to swallow and thing to deal with, man. I don't know how y'all feel about this. People, let me just go quick. I don't normally go to the comments this quick, but yeah, free Diddy, bail. Somebody says give him 20 years, no karma. Say I agree. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think Diddy should get bail? I agree. Somebody says this is Cassie, I don't know what that is. Sorry. These crimes are not real. He's not a good person. But just look at the other, some saying he's violent. Some people say no bail. No bail, yes. Some people saying yes. All right, I guess it's tied. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting caught up in the emotion of being in the courtroom, but yo, Diddy did not get bail. I think after having these 5 huge charges linger over your head for 10 months, and we're gonna go through all the reasons why the judge felt like he kept him, like he wanted to keep him. I'll tell you all the reasons why Mark said they should let him go. I'll tell you everything that the government said of why that he should stay in. My feeling is that the government are just being sore losers, and Comey has a lot to answer to, bringing forth these kind of charges. A lot of people feel like they overcharged him, and I feel like Comey is just trying to save face and trying to, keep him inside as long as she can, so she doesn't look bad for losing these 3 major charges. Bringing these kind of charges, how you not give this man bail, man? That's tough, man. All right. Yes. So for those who are just logging on right now, Sean Diddy Combs this morning beat the RICO Act. He beat SCE trafficking, Jane and Cassie. However, he was found guilty on the Mann Act for Jane and Cassie. And this afternoon at around 5 p.m., the judge once again denied bail, saying that he was a violent person. The judge, y'all know me unfair, the judge did bring up some good points. One of the strongest points, I'll just jump to that now. One of the strongest points that the judge brought up was the fact that he put hands on Jane June the 8th, 2024. That was only 3 months after they raided his house. Diddy knew that there was an investigation, and he continued to have freak-offs with Jane, which is not a problem, but he put hands on her. We saw pictures and we saw video of Jane. Just let me finish, bro. I want to talk with you, but you're sidetracking me. He put hands on Jane, and there was pictures and videos. Diddy has never denied that. If your 3 houses gets raided by the federal government, and you know that they are watching you, and you know there's an active investigation, and you go and put hands on somebody, they're going to use that against you. And that's one of the reasons why they want to keep him and not give him bail. At the end of the day, yes, he had a major victory, but however, he is still a prisoner and he is still found guilty. And they're going to use every single thing against him. That was just one of them that, as much as I feel like in my heart, and just maybe I'm being sensitive towards the family and towards the kids or whatever, but again, Diddy should have played his hand a lot smarter. The minute even before the raids, Diddy knows that they were after him, all right? He should have been acting and walking around like a model citizen. If I were him, I wouldn't be doing no freak-offs. If I were him, I would take one girl, move her into my house, and not do anything, knowing what was in Cassie's lawsuit. Don't forget, Cassie's lawsuit came out in November 2023. The raids didn't happen until March 2024. Diddy should have been using his head and not be putting himself in these kind of situations. He shouldn't have been doing these DRUGs and having Jane around and putting himself in a situation. I told you guys earlier today that he might even face state charges for what he did to Jane that night on June 8th. It's been testified, and that can be used against him. So right away, just Jane alone, he beat that case. Well, he beat the charges today, but it could still be brought against him in state court. And by the way, not the SEX trafficking, but the DV in state court. He put hands on Jane June 8th. That's what she's testifying to. And he could be brought up on charges on DV. The statute of limitation has not passed. It just happened in 2024, okay? So there's that. The judge brought it up. Another one of the reasons why the judge brought it up and said, I'm not going to give you bail, which is another stupid move by Diddy. His defense team, Mark, Tenny, all of them, they all said, yo, your house got raided. They're going to come and arrest you soon. This is in September, a couple of weeks before September. They said, we would advise you to come to New York and be ready to turn yourself in or ready to make yourself be arrested. That's why Diddy checked himself into the hotel. He thought he was gonna turn himself in, but the night before they came and arrested him. Was that wrong or right? That's up to you guys to decide. However, when they arrested him in his hotel room, they found that he was setting up to do another freak off for potentially call Cowboy for Angels, which is what he has been charged for, which would be, somebody selling themselves. And they also caught him with his Gucci bag, which has DRUGs in them. So that is two examples of Diddy not necessarily being on bail, but knowing there was an active investigation on him under the RICO Act with DRUGs and with having women and paying people for SEX. Why, if you're under investigation, will you be doing that? That is one of the two biggest reasons why the judge says, yo, I'm not giving you bail because when you're under investigation, you were doing these things. If I send you home now, what's to say that you won't go and use these services? And again, it's up to you guys to decide if it's illegal to use these services or not, because these services are available, so why shouldn't he be allowed to use them? Why don't you arrest the services? But that's just a rabbit hole, because the services are dancing. Diddy was using these services for SEX, but let's just not get into that. So those are two big mistakes. And also too, y'all know that when he was in MDC, he was calling Don Richard, and he was allegedly kind of like badgering people. So they're saying that because he is a violent criminal convicted, that's the reason why he shouldn't get bail. It's up to you guys to decide what you think about that. But again, I jumped over a little all over the place to just give you guys the tea right away.
I want to learn more history about the Mann Act. Let me expand this and see what the Mann Act is. Let me bring it in. So let me expand this a little bit more. All right, there. I think that's good. So let me move myself out of the way and I put myself up here. So according to the Mann Act, which is what they are pursuing Diddy on with those two charges that he was found guilty on. So the Mann Act, let me highlight this. Come over here, sorry. The Mann Act, known as, all right. So the Mann Act, the MANN Act, also known as the White Slave Trafficking Act of 1910. While ostensible aims at combating sex trafficking, was intertwined with racist anxieties. Sorry, my baffling just took hold of me a second. All right, let me start this over. The Mann Act, the MANN Act, also known as the White Slave Traffic Act of 1910, while ostensibly aimed to combat sex trafficking, was intertwined with racist anxieties and was notable use to target and prosecute black men. This is a key aspect of its anti-black roots. Wow. So they're saying that this Mann Act was specifically used to target black men, innocent men, right? If they could find them guilty on this Mann Act, then they could do whatever they want to do. So let me continue. Here is why the Mann Act is considered to have an anti-black root. Racialized context. The Mann Act was enacted during a period of heightened anxieties around white slavery, which often contain racial undertones and fears of women's increasing independence and interracial relationship. Targeted of black men, the law, broad language, specifically the phrase immoral purposes, allow for its application to consensual interracial relationship, leading to the prosecution of black men for relationship with white women. These prosecutions often stem from racist sentiments and anxieties. And anxieties about black men challenging racial norms. Let's continue. I don't know why that word was all right. Example like Jack Johnson. The case of Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight boxing champion, exemplifies the Mann Act's racist application. Johnson was convicted under the act for his relationship with a white woman despite her relationship being consensual. Wow. Let's continue. White Slave Traffic Act titled, the very title of the act, White Slave Traffic Act, reflects the racial context in which it was created, highlighting the focus on protecting a white woman. Wow. Important note, while the Mann Act had problematic beginnings and was used for racial purposes, it has undergone amendments to address its misuse against consensual relationship and is now primarily used to prosecute sex trafficking, especially involving minors. Wow. That's the history of the Mann Act. That's what they're trying to get Diddy on. All right, let me come back over here. Not saying that Diddy's a good guy. I'm just saying that,
Right now, we are awaiting the bail hearing of Sean Combs to get underway. And if the judge grants his release, Combs is likely to get out of jail later today. The government is seeking to keep him in custody until his sentencing. And all of this comes after the jury reached a split verdict earlier today, finding him guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution in connection with his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, an ex-girlfriend who testified under the pseudonym Jane. Combs was found not guilty of racketeering conspiracy, the most serious charge, and those 2 counts of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. As the jury left the courtroom, Combs clasped his hands in front of his chest and mouthed, "Thank you." Combs turned in his seat to his family and said, "I'm coming home, baby. I'm coming home." And he also kneeled on the ground and appeared to pray briefly after the jury was out of the room. ABC News' Rena Roy is live outside the courthouse there in Lower Manhattan for us. And Rena, what are we expecting from this bail hearing?
Well, Alex, the hearing has been scheduled for 5 o'clock. It is now 5:01 on the dot. We are hearing it's going to get started any moment now. We know prosecutors, they have arrived in the courtroom at this hour. And the family also just arrived to court a couple of moments ago. There's just a massive crowd here waiting to see what happens. As we know, Combs has been held by federal authorities since September of last year when he was arrested. But we could see him potentially walk out of those golden doors here tonight if the judge rules in his favor. All day, the defense and the prosecution, they put together their cases for and against his release. Prosecutors say that he is a flight risk. They say that he is a danger and that he should be held until his sentencing. But the defense is saying it's inappropriate to hold him. They say that he needs and wants to go home to his family. And they've brought up several reasons for that, including the fact that his mother, Janice Combs, who we've seen in court here almost every day of this trial, she is 85 years old. She lives near him in Florida. She wants him to be her caretaker, apparently. He also has children, they say, including a 3-year-old that he needs to take care of. So we'll have to see how this all plays out. Again, it's going to get started any moment now, Alex.
Well, and Rena, we were just looking behind you. There's that black Sprinter van. We've seen the family of Diddy get out of a similar Sprinter van. I don't know if that's the same vehicle. But look, I mean, if he is released today, how would that work?
So there are a couple of different options that we could see play out if he is released. And again, that's a big if. We have to see how the judge rules, how he weighs the different arguments here. Like I mentioned, we could see him walk right out of those golden doors here at the federal courthouse in Manhattan, where we have, at this point, dozens and dozens of reporters and onlookers waiting to see what happens. Or he could be sent back to MDC Brooklyn. That's where he's been held behind bars. We could see him sent back there to fill out some paperwork and go through some of the proceedings there before he's actually released until his sentencing, Alex.
Well, and Rena, you've been outside that courthouse all day. I'm curious, I mean, what has the mood been like, especially since his verdict was rendered?
Well, we've really seen a mix of people out here, a lot of characters who are celebrating or lamenting this decision. And you can hear people are honking as they come by. I think that's actually the family Sprinter van that you mentioned that's pulling out. The family just got here. So there's been a lot of commotion, you can probably tell. It's a busy New York City street, so there's people just coming by to see what's going on. But there are also people who have been here since the beginning. Some of them have been chanting, "Let Puff go," ahead of this hearing. Again, we are standing by and waiting to see how this all unfolds.
All right, Rena, thank you for that. And for more on this verdict, I want to bring in ABC News legal contributor and criminal defense attorney Bernarda Villalona, along with ABC News contributor and senior entertainment reporter for ESPN's Anscape, Kelly Carter. And Bernarda, I want to start with you. Walk us through the process of a bail hearing.
Yeah, so in terms of what the judge has to decide, the judge has to see whether the defense, by clear and convincing evidence, can prove to this judge that Sean Combs is not a flight risk and that he doesn't pose a danger to any particular person or to the community. Of course, what the prosecution is arguing, that there has been a change in circumstance in the sense that it's no longer alleged that he committed transportation to engage in prostitution, but instead that now a jury of his peers has convicted him of that. So that is a change in circumstance. But you also have that competing narrative from the defense that says, look, you held him in custody pending trial based on the highest charge of racketeering, of RICO conspiracy, and sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, which carried a mandatory minimum of 15 years or up to life. Being that there's a change in circumstance and that a jury of his peers has found him not guilty of those highest charges, that he should be released, especially when you take into account that there is no mandatory minimum of a sentence of having to deal with the transportation to engage in prostitution. There's also competing narrative in terms of what is the criminal guidelines, the guideline sentence as to what Sean Combs is facing. The defense is saying that the guidelines is 21 to 27 months. We know that Sean Combs has only been in custody since September, so I believe it's only 10 months that he's been in custody. The prosecution is saying that the guidelines guidelines is recommending 51 to 63 months incarceration. Of course, all the time that he served, he'll get credit for that. But now you have something else that has been poured into the mix, in the sense that Doug Wigdor, the attorney for Cassie Ventura, submitted a letter to this judge and saying that if you release Sean Combs, he is going to be a threat to the safety of Cassie Ventura and that he should remain in custody pending sentence. We can get some insight as to where the judge is leaning in terms of a
Lie. He's not going to be a threat to anybody. Why? Because he wants his freedom. And how is he going to possibly think that he would get the opportunity to be free and then come out and do harm to someone else that could put him away for the rest of his life? He's not going to do that. He's not going to retaliate. Think about it. If he had the opportunity to retaliate prior to settling with Cassie, he's not going to be a threat to Cassie, because why? He's going to be watched and they're going to be in high alert. Diddy is going to stay far away from Cassie. Diddy is going to move to Florida. He's already a resident of Florida. He's just going to move down here and just relax and do his business, probably put his sons in the forefront and stay in the background and run everything, right? The man is not going to do anything to anybody. That's a far stretch. Let's continue.
Sentence if he chooses to keep Sean Combs in custody, because in his mind he may be saying, like, look, you're going to do more than 10 months, so let's keep you in custody because that's where I'm leaning. He's not going to say that on the record, but that is something to glean.
Well, and Kelly, you can't talk about hip hop without mentioning Diddy, right? And so I'm curious, after this verdict, how is the hip hop community reacting to this?
Yeah, you know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The silence has been incredibly loud since Cassie first released that really explosive civil suit in 2023. And I feel like what we probably saw primarily happening is that people were really taking a wait and see attitude. They wanted to see what happened with this case. But I think because of the testimony that we've heard and because of that 2016 footage from the Intercontinental Hotel incident, it's going to be really difficult for people who have a very similar platform, who have amplified platforms like Sean Combs, to speak in support of him, which is probably why we've heard silence for the most part. We have heard from a few people, 50 Cent, who has been one of the only people who has been talking throughout the entirety of this case, you know, making a comment. We've heard from Rosie O'Donnell, we've heard from Kesha, but it's been really silent, I think, in the aftermath of this. We've only kind of seen what the public has said, and the court of public opinion is really mixed right now.
Well, and Bernarda, as his defense team petitions for his release on bond, we've heard the mentioning of his mother, his 85-year-old mother, who wants him to be her caretaker. We've heard the mention of a 3-year-old child. How does that play in the judge's calculations here?
So interestingly enough, those factors right there are going to be taken into account when it comes to sentencing, but not specifically given much weight when it comes to detention awaiting sentencing. So yes, the judge will listen to what the defense has to say, but it's not going to be heavily determined on being the caretaker for his mother as well as for that 3-year-old child, because in the end, the judge has to take into account his risk of flight, but also protecting the public. Is he a danger to public safety or to any other victims? He has to take into account the public good when making this determination as to whether he should be released pending sentence. Again, he's been convicted now, so that sentence that he's going to face ultimately carries much more weight than releasing him pending sentence.
Well, and Kelly, listen, now that a potential life sentence is essentially taken off the table, there will be a day, presumably, where Diddy will be free and out and about in the public as well. And so I'm curious, you know, given his career and also given this trial, I mean, what does this mean for his legacy? Is there room for him to reemerge in the industry?
So much remains to be seen. I mean, we have seen him rehabilitate himself and remix, to kind of use a word that is synonymous with the work that he's done himself over the years. I don't know that would necessarily apply here. I personally don't see him necessarily returning to the industry that he left. And most certainly, I don't see him returning to it in the way that he had before. Remember, he was kind of this unofficial king of like the Met Gala, just the biggest and best and boldest kind of events across all industries. I don't see him returning to that life again in the aftermath of this trial and of these two guilty verdicts.
Well, and the other thing that strikes me, I'm curious because, as they're considering his sentencing here, they've said that he has no criminal record, but this isn't Diddy's first run-in with the law, right? I mean, there was that 1999 alleged incident with Steve Stout, another one alleged incident in 2015 at UCLA involving a kettlebell. Everyone remembers, and he wasn't charged in this, but there was certainly the high-profile incident that night. Him and J-Lo were at a nightclub, and there was a shooting. But what's different about where we are right now as a society, and also what's different specifically about this case?
Well, I mean, I think that we've learned so much. We put language to things that we probably didn't have language to back in 1999 when it comes to talking about, sexual assault of women. And so I think that has happened. I think we're far more educated about that now. But I think when this case in particular, this is the first time we've gotten these really intimate details, lots and lots of details about his personal life that we would have never guessed, were happening. And I think that is probably going to live in people's minds for a number of years, and ultimately will play a role in how we view Sean Combs, his legacy, and also his ability to work past whatever the incarceration might look like for these charges.
We were just told by our team that Sean Combs has walked into that courthouse there in Lower Manhattan. He greeted supporters. He was smiling. But Bernarda, as we wait for these proceedings to get underway, this verdict doesn't mean that he is out of the legal woods just yet, right? I mean, he's still on the hook for those civil suits.
Yeah, so while he's out of the woods criminal-wise, he still has those civil lawsuits. However, it's important to know when you're talking about civil lawsuits, you're talking about money. So he's out of the woods in the sense of that his liberty is no longer at stake. Probably his financial status is at stake, but not his liberty. Also important to remember that when we're talking about those civil lawsuits, while he may have escaped criminal liability, the burden of proof is completely different when it comes to civil lawsuits. It's by preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, 51% to 49% of whether he's liable on those counts that the lawsuit is based on, as opposed to in the criminal world, it was beyond a reasonable doubt. So we may likely see a different outcome on those lawsuits, but hey, he's ready for war. He beat the war in terms of this criminal case, and that was most important.
Well, and Bernarda, given your expertise, I mean, it seemed like as a defendant, he was really prepped to be found guilty on something, right? Because, hearing the three most severe charges, those not guilty verdicts coming down, you see his reaction. You see him thanking the jury. You see him with that message to his family, "I'm coming home, baby," and then appearing to bow and pray as the jury is out of there. And so I'm curious, from a defense stance, how was he prepped? How was he likely prepped going into this second day of a verdict?
So his defense team, and remember, we're dealing with more than one attorney. You're dealing with about 6 attorneys that has been on his side and have been on his side, especially Mark Agnifilo and Tenny Garagos have been on his side since day one. And they've been in constant contact, seeing him, talking to him since the first day and preparing him for this day to face this verdict and giving him ammunition to be like, keep your head up, that we're going to fight with you. We are with you. We're going to do our best. If something were to happen and you were to be found guilty, we've prepared this record for appeal, so we'll take it up to a higher court to appeal the conviction. So they prepared him either way it was going to turn out and kept his hopes high from the very beginning.
Well, and Kelly, I'm curious because you have great context here, especially whenever it comes to music and entertainment and in the world of hip hop. How would you equate this? I mean, is this a similar fall from grace as a Russell Simmons? Where does this chart?
I would venture to say this is far bigger, for a number of reasons. And I think to start, you have to acknowledge that Sean Combs truly is a cultural icon. 30 years in the making. He has been a presence in not only hip hop, but he expanded hip hop, not just for himself, but for the entirety of the business. He helped to, turn this into a multi-billion-dollar business. He helped to commercialize hip hop, and he also took hip hop outside of the community into spaces that the genre never imagined it to go to, from politics, which was very huge. The Vote or Die campaign was very significant, and he was leading the charge for that. You have the world of spirits. Forbes 500, list was something that I don't think anyone in hip hop ever aspired to do before, Sean Combs really kind of laid it out that something like that was possible. So this is absolutely significant because he really has been a representation, not only for hip hop, but also for Black excellence and for his story to kind of be where it is right now, I think is colossal. And it's something that we now have to have part of the conversation when we talk about all the things that he's done.
Yeah, it is actually pretty remarkable because when you talk about the span of his career from music and then kind of transitioning into fashion, and then I think in later years, or most folks have kind of come to know him through his promotion of Ciroc. He certainly have seen other rappers and entertainers who have gotten into the spirit industry, which has boomed since then, and he was kind of like the originator there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing about Sean is that he is an incredible marketer. And I think he really showed other people, both contemporaries and people coming up behind him, how to really take advantage and how to market, the product of themselves, because he was a master, at doing that, is a master at doing that. And I think he really showed a lot of people behind him and also people who were standing alongside him how to really do that and kind of function in this world of high industry.
Sure, and we just got word that the judge has taken the bench, so we're expecting these proceedings to get underway momentarily. But Bernarda, if I may, just breaking down the context of just how big of a trial this is. When you have a household name like Diddy, and the process by which even fielding a jury in a place like Manhattan where everyone knows him. I mean, this was a huge undertaking.
Oh, absolutely. This was a huge undertaking by the prosecution to actually go after Sean Diddy Combs. I was in the courtroom for pretty much every day of this trial, and you always felt the weight of who Sean Combs was in that courtroom, whether he spoke or didn't speak. People knew who he was and would take that into consideration no matter what anyone actually said. But in terms of sitting a jury, look how many jurors they had to go through. I mean, it was hundreds of jurors that they had to go through to be able to select a jury of 12 plus 6 alternates.
Well, and Bernarda, we have some breaking news right now. The judge has denied bail for Sean Combs. That's what I'm hearing from our team. The judge has denied bail, so he will remain in custody between now and sentencing. More to come on this, but
ridiculous.
The hearing and news that we were waiting for this afternoon, whether or not Sean Diddy Combs would receive bail, his bail has been denied. Bernarda, in just getting that news, I'm curious your initial reactions. Did it surprise you?
I am not surprised that this judge denied Sean Combs' release pending sentencing. You have to think that this judge is in a different position than when he first heard the bail application when Sean Combs was first arrested, because this judge has sat throughout the entire trial and has heard all the evidence that was submitted before this jury and evidence that was not submitted before this jury. So he has such a huge insight as to who Sean Combs is. Also taking into account that he knows what the guidelines are. And those guidelines, even if you take it from the perspective of the defense of 21 to 27 months, or you take it from the prosecution, whether it's over 50-something months, he's going to sentence him at least within those guidelines and not the 10 months that he's already served.
I just saw Aaron Katursky walk out of the courtroom, our chief investigative correspondent. Kelly Carter, your initial reactions to hearing that the bail has been denied for Diddy?
You know, I also am not surprised, too. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about is, in large part at least, are the people who wrote letters to the judge before he took the bench, you know, imploring him to keep Sean in custody. Not only Cassie, but also Deontay, who is the fashion stylist that was hired by Sean Combs and Cassie and who testified in here, imploring and asking for him not to release him out of custody. And I don't know if those letters, you know, bared, you know, any weight on the judge's decision, but my initial reaction is they may have very well done that exactly.
And I mean, you think about Cassie's testimony in particular, you know, many have said that she was the prosecution's star witness in this case, and certainly the one that the public was most familiar with as that tape that leaked from that alleged assault that took place in that hotel leaked out. But you know, when you talk about like her testimony and her process through this.
I have what? I have no.
Actually, Kelly, stick with me for just a second. I want to swing this to Rena Roy, who is outside the courthouse there in Lower Manhattan as this news has been trickling out. Rena, what can you tell us more about the judge's decision here?
Well, Alex, we are getting some information in real time from our teams inside the courthouse at this hour. We're told that almost immediately after the judge took the bench, he announced that the bail was denied. Now, keep in mind, this was just a couple of hours after we saw Combs celebrating in the courtroom, looking at his family, saying that he was coming home. He said, "I'm coming home, baby. I'm coming home." But it looks like that is not the case at this hour. Now, as this hearing got underway, though, we are told that Combs had a big smile on his face. He was hugging his defense attorneys, and prosecutors, they were also smiling. So it seems like overall pretty joyous. Of course, the mood probably switched as soon as this news came in from the judge. Prosecutors argued that this is a violent man who should not be released. And Cassie Ventura, the star witness for the prosecution, her lawyer said that she felt that he posed a danger if he were to be released. The defense, however, argued that it would be inappropriate to hold him, saying that he needs to be home with his family, Alex.
Well, yeah, that letter from Cassie, I read it. It was very, very powerful. But, you know, Diddy is.
Before I respond, I just have to laugh. Again, Diddy's not going to be violent to anybody. Diddy's not going to be violent to anybody. I doubt Diddy's going to do any more freak off. Everything that he has been doing is out. He's not hiding behind any doors, behind any curtains, in the closet. The man is a bit queer. The man likes to do things that's kind of strange, right? So Diddy's not going to do anything knowing that his freedom is on the line. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So let the man go home. As bad as he is, and I've had my thoughts, my says, let the man go home. Give him his freedom. Everything is out. There's nothing left to hide. All right? So.
A man that has means and certainly access. He has a plane. I know that it's his defense has said that, you know, he has a family and that the consequences of him fleeing would be greater than, you know, the time that he's likely to serve here. I'm curious, Rena, has the crowd there behind you started to react to this news?
Well, I I think everybody was waiting for this news to come out, and as it did, we heard a few cheers there. It looks like people are waiting for his family to come out once again as well. They have been waiting all day, watching them go in and out of the courthouse. You can see that the barricades there are just full of media, bloggers, reporters, and onlookers. There are people here that are very interested in seeing how this would all unfold. Of course, we just learned a few minutes ago that this bail has been denied. Combs will be held until his sentencing date, which we are still waiting to hear when that will be.
Yeah, and obviously the situation is developing, but we're getting more notes from inside that courtroom. Our team telling us that Combs looked to both of his lawyers as the judge read the decision. His head was largely down, though he was occasionally whispering to one of his attorneys. The district judge there said that detention is required based on Combs' conviction. He did not hear any arguments from the lawyers, and he had been as he read his decision from the bench there. But I want to go back to Kelly Carter, who I believe is still with us. Actually, before that, we're going to go to a special report with Whit Johnson.
This is an ABC News special report.
I'm Whit Johnson in New York. We're coming on the air right now because the federal judge in the Sean Diddy Combs trial has just denied bail for Combs hours after a split verdict in the racketeering and sex trafficking case against him on the third day of deliberations. The jury finding Combs not guilty on 3 of 5 counts, acquitting him of the most serious charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. Combs guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Each count carries a maximum of up to 10 years behind bars. The verdict considered a huge win for Combs, who is facing the possibility of life in prison. He's been behind bars since his arrest in September. Let's get right to ABC's chief investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky. And Aaron, we know that the defense was hoping that Combs would be able to leave the courtroom and go back to his family today. And earlier, he even said to his family there that I'm coming home. But it turns out that that is not the case. What are you learning from what happened in this hearing late today?
Sean Combs entered court just a moment ago, Whit, looking upbeat. He greeted his family, who crammed into the gallery, all in one bench, his mother, sons, twin daughters. And I think he was anticipating that he would be released following the mixed verdict, especially the acquittal on all of the violent crimes. But the judge immediately sat down at the bench, started reading his decision, saying bail is denied. He would not be released prior to sentencing because the judge said his incarceration is required based on what he was convicted of, transportation for the purposes of prostitution. The judge said the defense did not make any successful arguments to say that that expectation should be overridden.
All right, Aaron Katursky, thank you. Stand by for us a moment. You're taking a look at some of these live images from our WABC New York chopper camera here. You can see the crowd gathering outside the courthouse. A lot of people were hoping, people who were waiting there outside the courtroom, to be able to get a glimpse of Sean Diddy Combs as he was released. But again, that news coming down that he will not be released on bail for now. Let's bring in ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona. And Bernarda, we know that this case was not technically about domestic violence. At least those were not the charges against Combs. But of course, there was that now infamous video from the hotel surveillance that showed him physically assaulting Cassie Ventura. Is it possible that any of that evidence came down to what the judge was considering in terms of his release back to the public on bail?
100%, absolutely. You have to think that this judge is in a unique position that he heard all of the testimony, all of the evidence that was provided through this 7-week trial. He also knows of evidence that wasn't submitted before this jury. So he took into account what he actually heard. He took into account that it's no longer that Sean Combs is accused of transportation to engage in prostitution, but now that he has been convicted by a jury of his peers. He took into account that his ability to flee and not return for sentencing, as well as that he's a danger to the community and also to victims. Remember that Cassie Ventura's attorney, Doug Wigdor, submitted a letter to this court requesting that Sean Combs remains in custody because he is a danger to society. So taking all of that into account, in addition to what his potential sentence would be, does give us a cue into what he will actually sentence him to. While it's a mandatory of 10 years on each of these counts, there is a sentencing crime guidelines, and the prosecution is claiming that it's about 51 months to 63 months, while the defense is saying 21 months to 27 months, and Sean Combs has only been in custody for 10 months.
Bernarda, thank you. We are just getting this information from the U.S. District Judge here, citing Combs' domestic violence as part of that justification for his continued detention. He called it a propensity for violence. This is also a quote here, the judge saying it is impossible for the defendant to demonstrate that he poses no danger to the community. Again, that as part of this decision not to grant him bail, to deny bail to Sean Diddy Combs. I want to go to our ABC News legal contributor, Brian Buckmeyer. Brian, you've been watching this case very closely. You've been inside the courtroom at times. So now that bail has been denied, Brian, what are the next steps?
So the next steps will be sentencing, and between today and whatever the sentencing date is, and we're waiting to hear what that is, Sean Combs will be visited by someone from the probation department, and they'll interview him, speak with Sean Combs, family members, anyone else that they may be directed to, and they'll create what's called a PSI, or pre-sentencing investigation. That information will be given to both the attorneys as well as the judge, and will help guide them in terms of a sentencing. Now, Bernarda had pointed out the sentencing guidelines that both parties have put forward. The defense saying that the sentence should be anywhere from 21 to 27 months. The government saying anywhere from 51 to 63 months. But that PSI will provide what they believe the sentencing guidelines will be. And then either side will try to argue, come sentencing, that there are either aggravating circumstances, the government will oppose those to go higher, or mitigating circumstances to go lower. And that's when we'll find a sentence. And of course, the potential of what's called victim impact statements, people who will testify or give testimony about the sentencing of Sean Combs.
Brian Buckmeyer, thank you. I want to go back to Aaron Katursky. Aaron, we know that sentencing hearing scheduled for the fall. Sean Diddy Combs has already been in custody for about 9 months now, and he's also facing dozens of civil lawsuits. What more does he have ahead of him before that hearing? We know, I think it's on October 3rd.
October 3rd at 10 a.m. is when Sean Combs is going to be sentenced for his conviction on 2 counts of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. Each of those counts carries a maximum penalty of up to 10 years. And so prosecutors pointed out in their letter to the judge his total exposure is 20 years in prison. And the judge today, Whit, said that Combs's propensity for violence was starkly depicted on that 2016 hotel security camera footage that may well factor into the judge's sentencing decisions. In the meantime, Sean Combs will continue to be incarcerated at MDC in Brooklyn, the federal jail in Brooklyn, where he's been since his arrest. This is at least the 3rd, possibly even the 4th time that bail has been denied, and he will have to fight those civil lawsuits, at least at the outset, from behind bars. With
Aaron Katursky, thank you, and the entire team. Again, the judge denying Sean Combs bail following that split verdict earlier today when the jury acquitted him of the most serious charges of racketeering and conspiracy and sex trafficking. But the jury did find him guilty on those 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution.
All right, guys, I'm going to end it here. I'm going to leave it here. Listen, it is what it is. It is what it is. We just have to wait and see how they're going to sentence him. And that will be the final on the Diddy case sentencing. So with that said, remember, question everything. Because if you don't, you may fall for anything. Think and say. Have a good day.